taken images of myself and different females in my family generations, and I'm just taking pieces of their image and capturing it on the cloth. And it's about it's the relationship of the generation of females in my family. My tribe, Sagampoxes, we do a lot of cloth work, ribbon work. It's my way of paying tribute to that very real and tangible historical memory I have with my people, but also my family itself. You know, a lot of the women in my family, they work in sewing and doing things of that nature. So the material itself is a literal representation of that history. I'm coupling that with imagery that I found online of what people think Native women are. If you just Google Native American woman, you get these very obscene photos of females in headdresses and little band with a feather and things like that that are not only offensive, but they're, like I said, they're obscene, they're derogatory, they're pornographic. They're not seen as strong, confident, realistic women. The statistic of 1 in 3 Native women are raped or assaulted in their lifetime, how very real that statistic is. But that image of us being produced in the general public eye, of us being these sexualized, objectified images, it's, you know, that gives way to those ideas being all right and those things being acceptable. And it's something that to me is so heartbreaking, especially when I think about this from my perspective as a mother. You know, my daughter is growing up in a world where this is what they see her as. If you're constantly being objectified in the public view, you're going to have people think they can treat you any way they want. So the work I'm doing is just kind of relating the idea that people don't always think of the stereotype as being something that's dangerous, but it actually is. It breaks down the reality of who someone is, and once you objectified someone, once you turn them into something that's no longer human, you'll treat them any way you want to. And the reality is that happens to Native women every single day. So the work I make is addressing that issue, but from a very personal perspective.
Because this show is about stereotypes, my work is a combination of a lot of found objects assembled together and then added feathers to it from one of the art supply stores so that I could incorporate it into my piece. It's like when you walk into a lot of the Indian trading posts, whether they're Indian owned or they're not, you see a lot of articles in these shops that are Indian themed, not necessarily Indian made. Just like in the old days when movies portrayed us, there were a lot of misrepresentations of various tribes. Some of the people that they portray, for instance, I saw a movie about the Seminoles. Well, there was nothing Seminole about any of the people that were dressed. They all had Plains outfits on. So you look at how over the years the movies, the TV programs, the books have portrayed us and stereotyped us into this certain mold. So when tourists come over from Europe, they expect to see the Indians that are portrayed to them with headdresses or feathers in buckskin, you know, and they're always looking around going, well, where are the real Indians? We're going, well, we're right here. This is us. I think that when you do art and you do something a little different vein of what you're used to, then you have a lot of freedom and a lot of time to experiment, to develop something out of the realm of what you do. So it's always a challenge for us artists to do something that's just kind of on the edge of what we normally do. And that's what I like about being able to be involved in this show. And it's great to see that a lot of my friends are going to be doing this show. So that's why I said it's going to be an exciting time to see what they all come up with.
I've got 13 painted vinyl records. They're going to be kind of floating off of the wall. I started painting the vinyl records a long time ago. Kind of got a mishmash of ideas in there, but the general concept is an abstracted background with imagery on top. And in particular with my work, I don't go for any specific native themes. I do come from several different tribes, but I kind of keep those ideas in the background as a reserve, and I tend to kind of deal more with like pop culture type imagery and issues, and some native imagery has weaved its way back into the work that I've currently done for the show. With the kind of work that I like to make, I've got this notion of putting it up on the wall and letting it stand as a piece of art, and then if I can avoid a name tag, it's good, because I think my particular name, if you have any inkling of where those names come from, there's specific tribal regions. You know, Hoka is a Lakota word, Pine Ridge, South Dakota, Skenador is Oneida, Wisconsin. Like back there, that name's like Smith. So if you don't see the name, you just see, oh, it's contemporary art, hopefully. And so I think there is a stereotype, and there's there's an expectation that native artist, native name, you're going to see that imagery right away. I like to kind of break from that. The roots of my art came from graffiti. That was the first thing I did on my own. So I mean, that was the first kind of aesthetics, colors, placement of imagery. It was the first thing that I really got heavily invested in. I ended up taking art lessons and then going to art school eventually, but it was graffiti and then into murals, and so roundabout way coming into more structured forms of learning how to make art. So those were big things I think that kind of bubbled to the surface. The one thing that I've thought about for a long time, and it's kind of goes back to that graffiti mentality, is leaving this long trail of work. You know, that's, I guess, just a long-term goal of making as much things and as many things as possible before I'm gone.
I'm very tickled that I was able to use one that I've had for a number of years, and it's called Kichmi. I'm Indian. I'm a citizen of the Comanche Nation, and we're one of the iconic Plains tribes. We lived in teepees in the past, we hunted buffalo, we were horse culture, all of that. So Hollywood loved that image. It really represents appropriation, and that other people have come in to copy our ceremonial regalia, and they may not necessarily know much about the culture, but they know something about it, and they put together an outfit that might not be always correct. The other image is also another stereotypical image, is the association of Indian people with tobacco. Tobacco at one time for us was used in very ceremonial and sacred ways, and so it could have been smoked in a calumet in the 1850s. Sit down with somebody and let's work out our differences, and over this smoke, you know, let's resolve our differences. So it was used in ways like that. It became commercial, and it moved way beyond what Native people ever considered tobacco to be. Instead of being used in a ceremonial and sacred way, it became commercial. Cigar Store Indian is another mascot image, and it was always my idea to, maybe if I win the lottery, maybe I could rescue all those cigar store Indians and transform them into something different. But this image really, it represents that story, the association of Native people with tobacco. This show represents an opportunity for us to communicate our feelings and to share information. It creates bridges of understanding between people that might not always understand deep culture. So the two objects that I have are just simply a message to convey some information that maybe no one thought about before, and to share that information. While in our culture there are some things that aren't shared, I've always had an issue with that, because if we don't share our stories, if we don't share our language, then they're going to be lost.
The piece I did is a board game, and it's about stereotypes and cartoons. Cartoons that I've seen growing up on Saturday morning cartoons, and maybe not realized then when I was a little kid that the stereotypes were so strong in it. It touches on current cartoons, older cartoons from the 50s. You know, we grew up with these cartoons, and some that are more modern day, South Park and Family Guy, and it's just showing, I guess, the lighter side of what a stereotype. I did the piece with cartoons because I wanted to stay on the lighter side. If you stay on the lighter side of things and you're talking about stereotypes, if you start the conversation and keep it light, then people are more likely to hear what you're saying and be more open-minded to it rather than being on the defensive. I like seeing what else is out there. I haven't seen this, so I'll do a little, have a little idea. I've not seen this, so I'll try it. And a lot of it is challenging myself to see if I can make that, or if I have an idea to try to get it from maybe a 2D idea to a 3D idea.
Some of my football helmets from my Sacred Mascot series, it just deals with my spin on the use of Native American mascots in sports. The helmets, just kind of my way of offering a different perspective on Native mascots. Not really in-your-face activism, but there's some subtleties that could be considered offensive to people that aren't natives. So I just kind of wanted them to see, well, if you're offended by this, maybe you can see the perspective, the Native American perspective on mascots. I came up with another idea to do a play on Picasso's Guernica. The painting itself is kind of like my experiences growing up in Osage County. That's where I'm from. And this piece, this Guernica piece that I've done, is called Celica, Osage County, and it's got an old Celica in the middle of it. It's on blocks, a res car, if you will. And anyway, the piece just deals with stereotypes I grew up with in Osage County and Hominy as a white guy living with the Osages, and it's some stereotypes I had actually towards Native Americans. So that's all in the work. The car on blocks, I can quickly just say, when I was in school in Santa Fe, there was a car in the parking lot. It was a res car. It was on blocks, and the story went that the student hawked the tires for the semester so he could have some cash, and then whoever told me said, you look at the end of the semester, he'll have tires on it, and he can drive back home, and sure enough, that's what happens. So one of the things that I try to tell people about my work and doing Native American work is I'm Native, but I don't look Native. I'm a white guy. So as far as racism, things like that, I don't have to deal with it, stereotypes, because I'm just a white guy. So the way I've always looked at it, personally, from an offensive standpoint, if you could say it that way, is when I hear things, people say or whatever, I think about my mother and her family. My mother's where I get my native blood from. So those things that kind of would hurt me, it seems to, I feel worse for my mother and her family.
My piece in the show is called Princesses. As a native, I hear this term that, oh, my great-grandmother was an Indian princess. So I took that literally, and I'm making a whirligig. So mine is a piece where the wind turns the windmill. There's a native princess, and you can tell by her elk-tooth dress, her tiara, and she's waving to you as you see let's say the Queen of England does. She does this a lot too. Now, my traditional work, I'm a potter, and so the native influence is always there. I use native motifs. I use the buffalo, I use deer, I use dancers, birds, dragonflies. So you see that theme all across my work, but it's not really a stereotype unless you just want us to put us all together into one group and say that is a stereotype. When I first started out to be a potter, I didn't really realize I was going to be a potter. I started looking at Japanese pottery, Korean pottery, Chinese pottery, looking at that style. I like the influences that they have on their pieces. There's nothing in pottery that hasn't been done before. So all I am doing is doing the shapes and the sizes in my own image as far as what I see. I take those traditional shapes that potters long ago did, even native potters did long ago, and just give them my little touch to them, and hopefully they work out. I've been real happy with them here lately. Oh, I haven't seen what other people are doing for the show, and I hope it is a little tongue-in-cheek. That's how I took it, so I hope there was a little tongue-in-cheek with some of the other artists. Some of us can get a little over the top and be overthink things. So I try not to overthink.
This piece is called, it's a study for a set called Vessel. I photographed a young, pregnant Indian woman. She's nude, she's in a very classic style. So she's not wearing any of the beads or feathers that people typically expect Indian people to wear all the time. It talks about the foundation of our beliefs today is based on tradition, based on traditional values and traditional culture. And it talks about not only the responsibility of this young woman and her partner to raise this child, to care for this child, but also our responsibility as Native people to care and nurture for our culture, to take care of it so it can remain healthy and strong. This piece was based on tradition, but I'm using a contemporary young woman to show that we are all not relics in museums, that we are still here today. I deliberately showed her without clothing because obviously I wanted to emphasize her pregnancy, but I also wanted to eliminate all the beads and trinkets and feathers that people think that Indians have to wear to be Indian. But I was also addressing the way that so much of the world views Indian women, as evidenced in Halloween costumes you can buy online, all with the intention of bring that boy back to your teepee, that kind of thinking. Indian women have the highest rates of abuse, sexual abuse. 3 out of 4 women will be raped. Indian women are 10 times more likely to be murdered. So this kind of thinking adds to the degradation of Indian women and dehumanizes us. And so by placing her in this classic pose, I felt like this image would separate her and give her the dignity that Indian women deserve. I'm doing a lot of research in museum archives right now. I just received a fellowship to the Smithsonian Institution where I had access to all their archives, and it gave me the opportunity to tie these documents into my work. Doing my research at the Smithsonian showed me the importance of leaving a paper trail. And so now I am really taking care of my own archives, which the Smithsonian wants. The Smithsonian is going to be taking my entire archives of past work and anything that I'll send them to keep, because I'm trying to create a trail for future artists. So often people say, that happened 500 years ago. You people need to get over that. But I like to show how these treaties, these documents, these atrocities that happen to Indian people are still playing an influential part in our lives today.
Something that is very common for people who are Cherokee specifically to hear when they mention that they're Cherokee is, oh, I'm part Cherokee too, but I can't prove it. And so that happens a lot. So the piece that I did for that was a very upset blonde girl who says she's lamenting that she's part Cherokee but can't prove it. And so instead in the dolls rolled, I thought that was just very a nice juxtaposition of that idea. Because that is literally the proof of whether or not you're Cherokee or not. One of the pieces I produced is a take on what I consider Native American razors. One of the things that people don't really realize as a stereotype is that Natives don't shave. They don't have a whole lot of body hair. So I did play on a Gillette package and created one Indian razor, which is a set of tweezers, because we just don't have to shave. I have a war club, which is one I've done a couple of. This one is the latest. It's a traditional war club that incorporates a vintage Pontiac hood ornament. Now, a lot of people forget that Pontiac, the cars were named after Chief Pontiac of the Ottawa, and they've completely divorced the historical figure with the cars. And so I took something that was an appropriated native image of the Indian head ornament, and I actually put it on something that was actually native. And so it just kind of brought it all back home with that idea. And the last piece that, that I did, another, going back to being Cherokee, another reference when people bring up to their Cherokees, oh, my great-grandmother or my grandmother was a Cherokee princess. Cherokees don't have princesses, but so I created a pageant sash that was Cherokee Princess 1878, and it's the title of it is The Missing Link, because if somebody found that, well, there you go, your grandmother really was a Cherokee princess. All of my work for this show in particular reference those specific stereotypes because they've been such a big part of my life, and they've been something that I probably deal with weekly, if not daily. It's just something that I think people tend to forget, that they're actually just perpetuating stereotypes when they engage in conversations. It's just kind of my perspective on when I encounter those stereotypes.
The work in the show is a sort of a reaction of some of the experiences I've had as a result of submitting work to Native American art shows and being rejected because it wasn't native enough. So I decided to just create a body of work that used stereotypical imagery of like what their vision or their preconceived knowledge of what Native American art was, and kind of made fun of it with superimposing or these funny phrases that sort of make fun of the very idea of what they were asking me to do. It seems like every time I enter in work, it's like, well, it's not what we were looking for. It's like, well, what were you looking for? It's like, well, have you considered doing landscapes or maybe some buffaloes or teepees? And I thought, well, I'll take this list of suggestions and just really make fun of it. Their sense of humor and their way of like taking cultural ideas and kind of, I don't know, putting a mirror up to it is always interesting and fascinating to me. And I think that it works well in like identity type of work, identity-based work. One of the things I always think about whenever I'm laying out the text is I'll come up with a basic idea. Like I'll be like, okay, I want to do a horse print. Okay, well, what does that mean? And what type of iconography do I use for that? So I try to pick Southwest type colors. I pick color palettes based on that, and then I build a composition around it, or even just alter existing stuff because I'm kind of a collage artist. Alter it to the point where it's no longer really recognizable from its original purpose, and then I repurpose it. And with that, then I think, okay, well, if I'm doing horses, how do I make it where from a distance it looks like it says one thing, but when you approach the work and you become more intimate with it, you get to kind of read between the lines that smaller text that ends up like driving home the kind of funny moment. Probably will just continue some of the themes, but I'm also thinking like larger works, maybe even getting to like some 3D printing of some objects that will kind of still carry on the same kind of like funny type of use of irony and glib sense of humor, and I'm having to research media and see like how can I bring this type of concept into a new media. So it's kind of an exciting time because I really don't know exactly where it's going to go from here.